The diner was bustling with the usual morning energy, filled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon. Conversations mingled with the clinking of plates, creating a warm symphony of life and motion. Among the crowd, Maya stood quietly in line, clutching her purse as she practiced her order under her breath. Her accent was thick, and her words came haltingly, but she was determined to speak them correctly. For Maya, this simple task, ordering breakfast for her family, was an exercise in courage. Every syllable carried the weight of years spent trying to learn a language that felt foreign to her tongue. She had moved to this town with her 2 children just a year ago, fleeing a war-torn country where survival left little room for English lessons. Life here was supposed to be a fresh start, but it had come with its own battles. Today, however, was supposed to be different. As Maya reached the counter, she smiled hesitantly at the cashier. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded a piece of paper where she had written her order phonetically. "Hello, I would like 2 eggs. Over easy, and a toast. With coffee, please." Her words stumbled, but her determination shone through. The young cashier smiled politely, but before she could confirm the order, a voice cut through the room like a sharp blade. "Are you kidding me? Can't you even speak English properly?" The words came from a man seated nearby, his voice dripping with disdain. He wore a business suit, his coffee steaming beside him as he stared at Maya with a mixture of irritation and amusement. "This is America. Learn the language before you waste everyone's time." The diner fell silent. Conversations halted mid-sentence, and all eyes turned to Maya. She froze, her cheeks flushing crimson as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Her lips parted to say something, but the words refused to come. Her hands clenched the paper tightly, crumpling it as she stared at the floor. A couple sitting nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. The cashier looked helpless, her eyes darting between Maya and the man, unsure of how to respond. Maya took a small step back, her chest rising and falling as panic set in. She wanted to explain, to say something, anything, but her mind was a whirlwind of humiliation and fear. "I'm sorry," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Her accent thickened as emotion overcame her, making her words even harder to understand. The man laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Sorry? Yeah, well, sorry isn't going to help you when you can't even order breakfast without embarrassing yourself." A murmur rippled through the diner. Some patrons looked away, uncomfortable with the unfolding scene but unwilling to intervene. Others watched with morbid curiosity, as if this were a drama playing out for their entertainment. It was at that moment that a voice, calm but firm, broke through the tension. "That's enough." All heads turned to the source, a young man in his late 20s standing by the counter. His presence commanded attention, not because of his expensive suit or confident demeanor, but because of the quiet authority in his voice. Ethan, the owner of a successful chain of local businesses, was well known in the community. He stepped forward, his piercing blue eyes locking onto the man who had insulted Maya. "Who are you to judge someone for trying to learn?" Ethan said, his voice steady but laced with a sharp edge. "Do you have any idea what it takes to move to a new country, to leave everything behind and start over?" The man in the suit scoffed, his arrogance faltering under Ethan's gaze. "I'm just saying." "No," Ethan interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You're not just saying. You're humiliating someone for something you clearly don't understand. If you can't contribute anything positive, maybe keep your comments to yourself." The diner erupted in murmurs of agreement. Maya looked up, her eyes wide with surprise as she took in the stranger who had come to her defense. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief washing over her. The man in the suit muttered something under his breath and returned to his coffee, his bravado now a faint shadow. Ethan turned to Maya, his expression softening. "You're doing great," he said gently. "Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." Maya nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She managed a small, shaky smile and whispered, "Thank you." Ethan turned to the cashier and said, "Make sure her order is on me." The cashier nodded quickly, punching in the items with a newfound determination. As Maya moved to a table in the corner, the tension in the diner slowly dissipated, replaced by a hum of admiration for Ethan's intervention. But for Maya, the moment lingered. She sat quietly, her hands still trembling as she replayed the scene in her mind. The humiliation was still raw, but so was the unexpected kindness she had just received. Ethan, noticing her unease, grabbed his coffee and walked over to her table. "Do you mind if I sit?" he asked. Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you for what you did," she said, her voice still shaky. "I didn't know what to do." Ethan smiled warmly. "You don't have to thank me. What he said was wrong. You deserve respect, just like anyone else." Maya looked down, fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "It's hard," she admitted. "Every day. I try. But sometimes it feels like no matter how hard I try, it's not enough." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My mom was an immigrant," he said after a moment. "She came here with nothing but a suitcase and a dream for a better life. People used to laugh at her, too, because of her accent. But she never gave up. And neither should you." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of hope. She smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, and for the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not as an outsider, but as a person with value. The diner slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the incident left a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed it. Some customers approached Maya to apologize for not speaking up sooner, while others quietly reflected on how they had treated newcomers in the past. Ethan stayed with Maya until her food arrived, chatting with her about her journey, her children, and her dreams. By the time she left the diner, she felt lighter, as if a small weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She walked out into the crisp morning air, her head held a little higher than before. Unbeknownst to Maya, someone in the diner had recorded the incident and uploaded it to social media. Within hours, the video went viral, sparking a wave of support for Maya and conversations about the challenges immigrants face. People from all walks of life reached out, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. For Maya, the day had started as an ordinary morning filled with dread. But by its end, she had not only found an ally but had also become a symbol of resilience and the power of kindness. And for the community, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that behind every accent, every struggle, and every misstep, there was a human story worth listening to. Maya walked home from the diner with a mixture of emotions swirling inside her. Her steps were slow and deliberate, as if the weight of the morning's events was holding her back. The crisp air did little to clear her mind, and the sound of her children's laughter from inside their small apartment was both comforting and bittersweet. She opened the door to find her son, Ravi, and her daughter, Priya, seated at the kitchen table, scribbling in their notebooks. The sight of their eager faces softened the ache in her heart, and she forced a smile. "Mama, you're back," Priya exclaimed, jumping up to hug her. "Did you get the eggs? I want to help cook today." Maya nodded, setting the bag of food on the counter. Her hand still trembled slightly as she unpacked the items. Ravi, ever observant, noticed her unease. At just 12 years old, he had developed a maturity beyond his years, often taking on the role of protector for his little sister and their mother. He approached Maya cautiously. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his dark eyes filled with concern. Maya hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "It's nothing, Beta," she said softly, using the affectionate Hindi term for her son. "Just a long morning." But Ravi wasn't convinced. He pulled out a chair for her at the table, gently guiding her to sit down. "Did something happen?" he pressed. "You look upset." Maya sighed, realizing she couldn't hide her feelings from him. She recounted the events at the diner, her voice trembling as she described the man's harsh words and the humiliation she felt. Priya's eyes widened in disbelief, while Ravi's fists clenched in anger. "That man is a bully," Priya declared, her young voice filled with righteous indignation. "You didn't do anything wrong, Mama." Ravi nodded in agreement. "You're trying so hard. That guy had no right to say those things." Maya looked at her children, her heart swelling with pride and sadness. "It's not easy," she admitted. "Learning English, building a new life here, it's all so hard. But I do it for you too. I want you to have a better future." Ravi leaned forward, his expression serious. "You don't have to do it alone, Mom. We can help you. Priya and I will practice with you every day. We'll make flashcards, do spelling tests, whatever it takes." Maya blinked back tears, overwhelmed by their support. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling them both into a tight embrace. In that moment, she realized that no matter how difficult things got, her children were her greatest source of strength. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, but the memory of the morning lingered in Maya's mind. That evening, as she tucked Priya into bed, her daughter looked up at her with wide, earnest eyes. "Mama, you're really brave," she said. "Don't let mean people make you feel small." Maya kissed her forehead, her heart swelling with love. "Thank you, Priya. I'll try." As Maya settled into bed later that night, she thought about Ethan, the stranger who had come to her defense. His words had been a balm to her wounded pride, and his kindness had restored a small piece of her faith in humanity. She decided she would visit his business the next day to thank him properly. The following morning, Maya gathered her courage and walked to the address Ethan had given her. It was a sleek, modern office building in the heart of downtown, a stark contrast to the modest neighborhood where she lived. She hesitated at the entrance, her palms sweaty with nerves. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her warmly, and after a brief explanation, Maya was led to Ethan's office. He was seated at his desk, reviewing a stack of papers, but he looked up immediately when she entered. "Maya, it's good to see you," he said, standing to shake her hand. His smile was genuine, putting her at ease. "I wanted to thank you," Maya said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "For what you did yesterday. It meant a lot to me." Ethan waved off her gratitude. "You don't need to thank me. What happened wasn't right, and I couldn't just stand by and let it happen." Maya nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Still, not many people would have done what you did. It's hard, sometimes, feeling like I don't belong here." Ethan leaned against his desk, his expression thoughtful. "I know it's hard. My mom went through the same thing when she came here. She used to practice her English for hours every night, but people still treated her like she didn't belong. It's why I feel so strongly about standing up for people like you." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Your mother must be very proud of you." Ethan smiled wistfully. "She passed away a few years ago, but I like to think she'd be proud of the man I've become." There was a moment of silence as they shared an unspoken understanding. Two lives connected by the shared experience of struggle and resilience. Before Maya left, Ethan handed her a flyer for an upcoming community event he was organizing. "It's a cultural exchange program," he explained. "People from different backgrounds come together to share their stories, their food, their traditions. I think you'd be a great addition." Maya hesitated. The idea of speaking in front of a crowd filled her with dread, but Ethan's encouraging smile gave her pause. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Over the next few weeks, Maya threw herself into learning English with renewed determination. True to their word, Ravi and Priya helped her every evening, turning their small living room into a makeshift classroom. They practiced vocabulary, pronunciation, and even role-play conversations to build her confidence. Slowly but surely, Maya began to feel more comfortable with the language. Meanwhile, the video of the diner incident continued to gain traction online. Local news outlets picked up the story, and Maya's face became a symbol of resilience and perseverance. People reached out to her with messages of support, and some even offered to help her with English lessons. For the first time since moving to the town, Maya felt like she was part of a community. When the day of Ethan's event arrived, Maya was both excited and terrified. She had agreed to participate, but as she stood backstage, waiting for her turn to speak, doubts began to creep in. What if she stumbled over her words? What if people laughed at her? Ethan appeared beside her, sensing her anxiety. "You've got this," he said reassuringly. "Just speak from the heart. People will listen." Maya took a deep breath and nodded. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. The room was packed, the audience a sea of unfamiliar faces. Her hands trembled as she gripped the microphone. But when she looked out and saw Ravi and Priya smiling at her from the front row, a sense of calm washed over her. "Hello," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My name is Maya, and I am an immigrant." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "When I moved to this country, I thought the hardest part would be leaving my home. But I was wrong. The hardest part has been learning to feel at home in a place where I don't always feel welcome." She went on to share her story, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the small victories that kept her going. She spoke about the diner incident, not to gain sympathy, but to shed light on the challenges faced by so many like her. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Then, one by one, people began to clap. The applause grew louder, filling the room with a sense of unity and understanding. Maya felt a swell of pride, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt like they didn't belong. After the event, people approached her with words of encouragement and gratitude. Ethan smiled from the sidelines, watching as Maya transformed from a quiet, hesitant woman into a confident voice for her community. That night, as Maya tucked Ravi and Priya into bed, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time since moving to the town, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning after the event, Maya woke up to an unexpected sense of lightness. For the first time in what felt like years, she wasn't burdened by fear or self-doubt. Her heart still raced when she thought about the applause, the encouraging faces in the crowd, and the sheer disbelief that she had managed to speak so openly. As sunlight streamed through the window of their small apartment, Maya decided it was time to take a walk outside, to feel the world beyond her door without the ever-present shadow of insecurity. She didn't have a destination in mind, but her feet carried her toward the park where Ravi and Priya often played after school. As she passed the bakery on the corner, the owner, Mrs. Gardner, gave her a warm wave. Maya hesitated for a moment before waving back, surprised by the sudden friendliness. Normally, their exchanges were limited to polite nods and the occasional smile. "Good morning, Maya," Mrs. Gardner called out, her tone unusually cheerful. "I saw you on the news. You were wonderful." Maya stopped, her cheeks flushing. "Oh, thank you," she said softly, her accent still thick, but her voice steady. Mrs. Gardner beamed. "You've inspired a lot of people, you know. It takes courage to do what you did. Stop by any time. I'll have some fresh bread waiting for you." Maya nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She continued her walk, noticing other familiar faces offering smiles or nods of acknowledgement. It was a small shift, but it felt monumental to Maya, who had spent most of her time blending into the background, avoiding attention. When she reached the park, she found a bench near the playground and sat down, watching children chase each other in carefree circles. A deep sense of contentment settled over her as she realized how far she had come since that day of the diner. But just as she was starting to relax, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She fished it out and saw a notification from a local news station. Curious, she opened the article, and her heart sank. The headline read, "Immigrant's Diner Incident Sparks Debate on Social Media. Is Inclusion Going Too Far?" The article went on to describe not just the event at the diner, but also the cultural exchange program Ethan had organized. While many applauded the initiative, there were others, vocal critics on social media, who saw it as unnecessary pandering. Some commenters even questioned whether Maya deserved the spotlight, accusing her of seeking attention or exaggerating her struggles. Maya's chest tightened as she scrolled through the comments. The words were cruel, dismissive, and deeply personal. Her hands trembled as she put the phone down, the hard-won confidence from the previous night crumbling under the weight of the criticism. She had expected challenges, but this felt like too much. Just then, she heard a familiar voice. Maya. Looking up, she saw Ethan approaching, his ever-present air of calm reassuring her immediately. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee, one of which he handed to her as he sat down beside her. "I thought I'd find you here," he said with a small smile. "How are you feeling after last night?" Maya hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "It was good," she said finally. "But today, not so good." Ethan frowned, noticing her distress. "What happened?" Maya hesitated, then handed him her phone. Ethan skimmed through the article and the accompanying comments, his expression hardening as he read. When he finished, he set the phone down and turned to her. "Maya, these people don't know you," he said firmly. "They're hiding behind their screens, saying things they'd never have the courage to say in person. Don't let them take away what you've achieved." Maya shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's hard, Ethan. They're saying I don't belong here, that I'm just looking for attention. Maybe they're right." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice steady and kind. "They're wrong. You're here because you've worked hard, sacrificed so much, and earned your place, and the attention. You didn't ask for it, Maya. It found you because your story matters." Maya looked at him, searching his face for the truth in his words. She wanted to believe him, but the sting of the comments still lingered. Ethan seemed to sense her hesitation and leaned back, taking a sip of his coffee. "You know," he began, "when my mom first came to this country, she opened a small tailoring shop. She barely spoke English, and people made fun of her all the time. But she didn't let it stop her. She kept going, one customer at a time, until her business became one of the most respected in the community." Maya tilted her head, intrigued. "What happened to her shop?" Ethan smiled wistfully. "She passed it on to me before she died. I don't run it myself. I have other businesses now, but I keep it open in her honor. It's my way of remembering her strength and resilience." Maya felt a pang of sadness at his story, but also a spark of hope. If Ethan's mother could overcome so much, maybe she could too. "Do you think I can make a difference?" she asked quietly. Ethan's smile grew. "You already have, and if you keep sharing your story, you'll inspire even more people. But only if you're ready. No one can force you to take that step." Maya nodded slowly, the weight on her chest lifting just a little. "Thank you, Ethan. I'll try." Over the next few days, Maya threw herself into her routine, focusing on her family and her English lessons. The online backlash still stung, but she decided not to let it consume her. Instead, she channeled her energy into preparing for a new challenge. Volunteering at one of Ethan's cultural exchange workshops. When the day of the workshop arrived, Maya was nervous but determined. The room was filled with people from all walks of life, each with their own stories and experiences. Ethan introduced her as one of the guest speakers, and as she stepped up to the podium, she took a deep breath. "Hello," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My name is Maya, and I am here to share my story. Not because I want attention, but because I believe our stories have the power to connect us, to help us understand each other." As she spoke, she noticed the audience leaning in, their faces filled with curiosity and empathy. She talked about her journey, her struggles, and the moment in the diner that had changed everything. But she also shared the kindness she had experienced, the strangers who had offered support, the friends she had made, and the hope that had kept her going. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest, stronger and more enduring than the fear she had carried for so long. After the workshop, several attendees approached her, thanking her for her bravery and sharing their own stories. One woman, an immigrant from a different country, hugged Maya tightly and said, "You've given me the courage to keep going. Thank you." Maya smiled, her heart full. She realized then that her story wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt out of place, everyone who had ever struggled to find their voice. And in sharing it, she had found her own strength. As the day came to an end, Maya walked home with a renewed sense of purpose. She no longer felt like an outsider looking in. Instead, she saw herself as part of a community that, while imperfect, was capable of growth and change. That night, as she sat with Ravi and Priya at the dinner table, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. For her children, for Ethan, and for the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. And for the first time in a long while, she looked toward the future with hope. The week leading up to the Cultural Exchange Summit was a whirlwind of emotions and preparation for Maya. She had been invited as a keynote speaker, a role she never imagined she would take on. Ethan had been her biggest supporter, guiding her through the process, helping her structure her speech, and encouraging her to embrace her authenticity. Despite his reassurances, Maya couldn't shake the nerves that crept in as the event drew closer. On the day of the summit, Maya woke early, her mind racing with questions and doubts. Could she do this? Would her story resonate, or would people see her as just another struggling immigrant? She went through her morning routine mechanically, ensuring Ravi and Priya had everything they needed before they left for school. As she watched them head out the door, she felt a pang of anxiety, but also a sense of resolve. If nothing else, she wanted her children to see her as brave. Ethan arrived to pick her up mid-morning, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. "Ready?" he asked with a smile as she slid into the passenger seat of his car. Maya took a deep breath and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The community center was abuzz with activity when they arrived. Volunteers were setting up booths showcasing different cultures, and the aroma of various cuisines filled the air. The atmosphere was vibrant and welcoming, yet Maya couldn't help but feel like an outsider as she took it all in. Ethan guided her to the backstage area, where a small group of speakers was gathered. Among them were local leaders, business owners, and other immigrants who had agreed to share their stories. Maya exchanged polite smiles with them, feeling both inspired and intimidated. These were people with polished voices and commanding presences. She felt small in comparison. "You'll be great," Ethan whispered as he handed her a bottle of water. "Just speak from the heart." When it was finally her turn to take the stage, Maya's hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone. The audience was larger than she had expected, with rows of attentive faces staring up at her. She could see Ravi and Priya sitting in the front row, their expressions filled with pride and encouragement. Taking a deep breath, she began. "Hello, everyone. My name is Maya," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I am an immigrant, a mother, and someone who has struggled to find her place in this community." She paused, scanning the room. "When I moved here, I didn't know the language, the customs, or how to navigate this new world. I felt like a stranger, even to myself. Every small task, like ordering breakfast at a diner, felt like climbing a mountain." Maya shared the story of the diner incident, her voice trembling slightly as she recounted the humiliation she had felt and the unexpected kindness of Ethan's intervention. She spoke about the challenges of learning a new language, raising 2 children alone, and facing prejudice from people who didn't understand her journey. "But I'm not here to dwell on the struggles," she said, her tone growing stronger. "I'm here to talk about hope, about the moments of kindness that have reminded me why I came here in the first place, for a better future, not just for me, but for my children." She looked toward Ravi and Priya, who were beaming with pride. "My children are my reason for everything I do, and it's their love and encouragement that have given me the strength to stand here today." The room was silent, the weight of her words settling over the audience. Maya took a deep breath, feeling a surge of confidence. "I used to think I was alone in my struggles, but what I've learned is that my story is not unique. It's shared by countless others, people who leave behind everything they know in search of a better life. And while our paths may be different, our dreams are the same. As she wrapped up her speech, Maya posed a question to the audience. What kind of community do we want to build? One that divides us by our differences, or one that unites us through our shared humanity? The room erupted in applause, and Maya felt a wave of relief and pride wash over her. She stepped back from the microphone, her heart pounding as she took in the standing ovation. Ethan was waiting for her backstage, his smile wide with pride. "You were amazing," he said, pulling her into a quick hug. "I knew you could do it." Maya smiled, her confidence growing with each passing moment. "Thank you, Ethan. I couldn't have done this without you." As the event continued, Maya was approached by numerous attendees, each eager to share their thoughts and thank her for her bravery. One woman, an older immigrant from Vietnam, hugged Maya tightly and said, "Your story is my story. Thank you for giving us a voice." The Cultural Exchange Summit was deemed a resounding success, sparking conversations about inclusion and understanding throughout the community. Local media covered the event extensively, highlighting Maya's speech as a pivotal moment. The video of her address quickly went viral, drawing attention from people far beyond the town's borders. But with the newfound recognition came unexpected challenges. While many praised Maya for her courage, others criticized her for playing the victim or seeking attention. Social media was a battleground of opposing opinions, and Maya found herself once again at the center of a storm. Ethan advised her to stay strong and focus on the positive impact she was making. "The people who matter are the ones who support you," he said. "Don't waste your energy on the others." Maya took his advice to heart, pouring her energy into her new role as a community advocate. She began volunteering at local organizations, helping other immigrants navigate their challenges and find their footing. She even started leading English classes, using the lessons she had learned to help others. Through her efforts, Maya became a symbol of resilience and hope. She was invited to speak at schools, community events, and even conferences, each time sharing her story with honesty and vulnerability. Her journey inspired countless others to step out of the shadows and share their own experiences. But Maya's greatest joy came from watching the ripple effect her actions had on her children. Ravi and Priya blossomed with confidence, taking pride in their mother's strength and determination. They began participating in community events, speaking up for others, and embracing their identity as children of an immigrant. One evening, as the three of them sat together at the dinner table, Ravi looked up and said, "Mom, you've changed everything. Not just for us, but for so many people." Maya smiled, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you too. You've always been my biggest supporters." The road ahead was still uncertain, and Maya knew there would be more challenges to face. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready to take them on. She was no longer just an immigrant trying to fit in. She was a force for change, a voice for the voiceless, and a beacon of hope for her community. And as she looked at her children, she knew that their future would be brighter because of the steps she had taken. Together, they were building a life filled with purpose, resilience, and love. And that, Maya thought, was worth every struggle she had endured. The days after the summit were a whirlwind of activity for Maya. Her story had ignited a spark in the community, and invitations to speak at local schools, cultural centers, and civic meetings flooded in. Each time, she felt a mix of nervousness and determination as she prepared to share her journey. What surprised her most, however, was how her newfound visibility began to change the dynamics of her life and the lives of those around her. One morning, as Maya was walking Ravi and Priya to school, a car pulled up beside them. She tensed at first, unsure of the driver's intentions, but relaxed when she recognized the diner owner stepping out. It was Mr. Grayson, a reserved man in his 60s who had always been polite but distant during her visits. "Ms. Maya," he called, approaching her with a tentative smile. "I'm glad I caught you. I've been meaning to talk to you." Maya glanced at her children, then back at Mr. Grayson. "Good morning," she said cautiously. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncharacteristically sheepish. "I just wanted to apologize," he began, "for what happened in my diner that day. I should have stepped in sooner. I let you down, and I've been regretting it ever since." Maya was taken aback. She hadn't expected this at all. "You don't need to apologize," she said gently. "What's done is done." Mr. Grayson shook his head firmly. "No, I do. That man's behavior was unacceptable, and I should have made it clear that it wouldn't be tolerated in my establishment. I want you to know that I've since implemented a zero-tolerance policy for harassment in my diner. And if you ever feel uncomfortable there again, please let me know." Touched by his sincerity, Maya felt a swell of gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. That means a lot to me." Before he left, he handed her a small envelope. "A little something for your efforts. Use it however you see fit." Later, when Maya opened the envelope, she found a $500 gift card to a local grocery store. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized the depth of Mr. Grayson's gesture. It wasn't just the money. It was the acknowledgement, the willingness to grow and support her journey. Meanwhile, Ethan's cultural exchange program was gaining momentum. Inspired by Maya's story, community leaders began to advocate for broader initiatives to support immigrants and foster inclusivity. Ethan invited Maya to help him design a series of workshops aimed at teaching empathy, communication, and cultural appreciation. Maya was initially hesitant. "What can I teach people who've lived here all their lives?" she asked Ethan during one of their planning sessions. He smiled. "You can teach them something they've forgotten. Perspective. You've lived a life they can't imagine. Your story reminds them of the struggles behind every accent and every hesitant word." The first workshop was held in a packed community hall, with people from all backgrounds eager to participate. Maya and Ethan co-led the session, starting with an icebreaker where attendees paired up to share something personal about their heritage. Laughter and thoughtful conversations filled the room as barriers began to crumble. Later, Maya spoke about the unspoken challenges immigrants face, things as simple as grocery shopping or understanding the utility bill. She invited participants to step into her shoes for a moment, handing out cards with common immigrant struggles written on them. Some people read aloud, "You can't find a doctor who speaks your language. You're ridiculed for mispronouncing a word. You feel invisible because no one makes an effort to know your name." The room grew quiet as the weight of these realities sank in. Ethan then guided a discussion about how small acts of kindness, like offering a smile, taking the time to listen, or learning to pronounce someone's name correctly, could make a world of difference. The workshop ended with participants pledging to become bridges in their community, people who would connect rather than divide. Maya felt a profound sense of accomplishment as people approached her afterward, thanking her for opening their eyes. But not everyone was supportive. As the cultural exchange program gained traction, so did opposition from a small but vocal group in the community. They criticized the initiative as pandering and accused Maya and Ethan of pushing an agenda. Flyers with inflammatory messages began circulating, and Maya received anonymous emails filled with hateful rhetoric. One particularly cruel message read, "Go back to where you came from. We don't need people like you changing our town." Maya's hands shook as she read the words, her chest tightening with anxiety. She had come so far, but this backlash threatened to undo her progress. For a moment, she considered stepping back, retreating into the quiet life she had known before all of this began. But then she thought of Ravi and Priya. She thought of the people who had approached her at the workshops, the children who had drawn inspiration from her story, and the friendships she had formed with others who shared her struggles. She couldn't give up now. Ethan found her later that day, sitting on a park bench, her face pale and her eyes downcast. "I heard about the flyers," he said gently. "Are you okay?" Maya shook her head. "It's hard, Ethan. Some days I wonder if I'm making a difference or just stirring up trouble." Ethan sat beside her, his expression resolute. "You are making a difference, and change is never easy. The people who are angry now are the ones who fear losing their comfort zones. But the work you're doing matters more than their fear. Maya took a deep breath, his words sinking in. I won't let them scare me, she said finally. I've faced worse than this. I'll keep going. That resolve was tested when the diner patron who had humiliated her showed up at one of the workshops. Maya spotted him immediately, sitting in the back row, his arms crossed and his expression guarded. Her stomach clenched, but she continued with the session, refusing to let his presence rattle her. During the Q&A portion, the man raised his hand. I don't agree with everything you're saying, he began, his voice gruff. But I came here because I've been thinking about what happened that day at the diner. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. He shifted uncomfortably, then added, I was wrong to treat you the way I did. I was angry about things in my own life, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. Maya stared at him, stunned. The apology was unexpected, and it took her a moment to find her voice. Thank you, she said softly. It means a lot that you're here today. The man nodded and sat back down, his expression unreadable. The moment was brief, but it felt monumental, a small victory in the larger battle for understanding and empathy. As the weeks turned into months, the cultural exchange program continued to grow, attracting attention from neighboring towns and even regional media. Maya became a fixture in the community, her story a reminder of the strength that comes from vulnerability and the power of human connection. One evening, as she prepared dinner with Ravi and Priya, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from a young woman in another state who had seen one of her speeches online. The message read, Your story gave me the courage to apply for my dream job. I was always afraid my accent would hold me back, but now I see it as part of who I am. Thank you. Maya's heart swelled with emotion. She looked at her children, who were laughing as they playfully argued over who would set the table, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been painful, but it had also been transformative, not just for her, but for the countless lives her story had touched. As she sat down to eat with Ravi and Priya, she realized that the community she had once felt excluded from was now a part of her. And she, in turn, had become a part of it. For the first time, Maya felt not just like an immigrant, but like someone who truly belonged. Months passed, and the ripple effects of Maya's journey continued to spread. The cultural exchange program, which had once been a small initiative, was now a cornerstone of the town's community development efforts. Neighboring towns had begun reaching out to Ethan and Maya, asking for guidance on starting similar programs. Maya found herself busier than ever, traveling to share her story, leading workshops, and helping to build bridges between cultures. But amidst the growing recognition, Maya remained deeply connected to her roots and her daily life as a mother. She still walked Ravi and Priya to school every morning, prepared their favorite meals, and helped them with their homework. Her children were thriving, their confidence blooming as they watched their mother transform into a symbol of resilience and hope. One evening, as the family sat together after dinner, Ravi brought out a folder. Mom, he began, his voice tinged with excitement, I have a surprise for you. Maya raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What is it, Beta? Ravi opened the folder to reveal a hand-drawn poster. At the top, in bold, colorful letters, it read, Maya's Place, a safe haven for immigrants. Below it was a drawing of a small, welcoming building with open doors and smiling faces inside. Priya leaned over, pointing at the details. Ravi and I came up with this idea together, she explained. A place where people like you can get help with English, meet friends, and feel like they belong. Maya's breath caught as she looked at her children's hopeful faces. This is beautiful, she said, her voice filled with emotion. But how would we make something like this happen? Ravi shrugged, grinning. You always say anything is possible if we work hard enough. Touched by their faith in her, Maya folded the poster carefully and placed it on the table. Let's think about it, she said, one step at a time. That conversation planted a seed in Maya's mind. Over the following weeks, she began discussing the idea with Ethan and other community leaders. To her surprise, they were enthusiastic, offering to help with funding and logistics. Ethan even suggested repurposing an old community center that had been abandoned for years. With a team of volunteers, Maya threw herself into the project. The building needed significant repairs, but the community rallied behind her, donating time, materials, and labor. Ravi and Priya joined in, painting walls and planting flowers outside the entrance. As the space began to take shape, so did Maya's vision for what it could be, a place where immigrants could find not only resources, but also a sense of belonging. When the grand opening day arrived, the small center was unrecognizable. Bright murals covered the walls, depicting scenes of unity and diversity. Inside, there were classrooms for English lessons, a resource library, and a cozy lounge where people could gather and share stories. Maya stood at the entrance, greeting visitors with a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. As people poured in, Maya noticed familiar faces, neighbors who had once been indifferent or even dismissive now showing their support. Mr. Grayson arrived with a tray of pastries from his diner, and Mrs. Gardner from the bakery brought a basket of fresh bread. Even the diner patron, who had humiliated her months ago, showed up, quietly placing a donation in the collection box near the door. The highlight of the event was a ribbon-cutting ceremony, where Maya was joined by Ethan, Ravi, and Priya. As she cut the ribbon, the crowd erupted in applause, and Maya felt a surge of gratitude for everyone who had believed in her dream. For the first time in a long while, she felt not just like an immigrant, but like a true leader in her community. The weeks that followed were a flurry of activity as Maya's place quickly became a hub of support and connection. English classes were held every evening, led by a team of dedicated volunteers. Workshops on job skills, financial literacy, and navigating local systems filled the calendar. Families gathered for cultural nights, sharing food, music, and traditions from around the world. One evening, as Maya was locking up after a long day, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw a young woman holding a baby, her expression hesitant. "Excuse me," the woman said in halting English. I need help." Maya's heart softened. "Of course," she said warmly, unlocking the door and inviting the woman inside. The woman, who introduced herself as Layla, explained that she had recently arrived in the town with her infant son, fleeing an abusive situation. She didn't know anyone and was struggling to find work and childcare. As Layla spoke, tears streamed down her face, and Maya felt a deep connection to her pain. She had been in a similar position once, feeling lost and overwhelmed in a new country. "You're not alone anymore," Maya said, placing a comforting hand on Layla's shoulder. "We'll help you." Over the next few weeks, Maya and her team worked tirelessly to support Layla. They connected her with a shelter that provided temporary housing, helped her enroll in English classes, and found a local daycare willing to care for her son at a reduced cost. Watching Layla's transformation, from fearful and isolated to confident and hopeful, reinforced Maya's belief in the importance of the center. Word about Maya's place began to spread, attracting attention from regional and even national media. Journalists came to interview Maya, captivated by her journey and the impact of her work. Donations poured in, allowing the center to expand its services. They hired a full-time staff, added a computer lab for job seekers, and launched a mentorship program pairing immigrants with local residents. But the most profound changes were in the community itself. Conversations about inclusion and empathy became more common, and relationships that had once been strained began to mend. People who had never spoken to their immigrant neighbors were now sharing meals and stories, finding common ground in their humanity. For Maya, the transformation was deeply personal. She no longer felt the need to prove herself or hide her accent. She embraced her identity fully, proud of the journey that had brought her to this point. And while there were still challenges, moments of doubt, resistance from skeptics, she faced them with the unwavering support of her family and community. One evening, as Maya sat on the porch of her home, Watching Ravi and Priya play in the yard, Ethan joined her. He handed her a cup of tea and sat beside her, his expression thoughtful. "You've changed this town, you know," he said, breaking the comfortable silence. Maya smiled, her gaze on her children. "No, we've changed it, together." Ethan nodded, lifting his cup in a small toast to courage, resilience, and never giving up. Maya clinked her cup against his, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Her journey had been filled with pain, doubt, and struggle, but it had also been marked by kindness, growth, and love. As she looked out at the life she had built, surrounded by people who believed in her and a community that had embraced her, she knew she had truly found her place. And though her story had reached its resolution, Maya understood that her work was far from over. There were still barriers to break, hearts to heal, and lives to uplift. But for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing she was no longer walking this path alone. Maya's place was more than a building. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, compassion, and the belief that even the smallest voices can create lasting change.